This is Hofstra's Campus Conversations, the official podcast of Hofstra University's leadership team, focusing on issues of importance to Hofstra and higher education. Now welcome today's host, Hofstra President Susan Poser.
Hello, and welcome back to Hofstra University's Campus Conversations. I'm happy to welcome back my co-host, who is also serving as my guest today, Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Charlie Riordan.
Thanks, Susan. It's great to be back in studio with you today.
Today we're going to talk about some recent exciting news. Hofstra University has achieved an R2 designation. Charlie, the best way to kick off this episode is probably by explaining what that means.
I'll do my best. So Hofstra has earned the distinction of a high research spending and doctorate production university by the Carnegie Classification of Institutions of Higher Education. This is a classification that's overseen by the American Council on Education. What does that all really mean? It's kind of inside baseball, but objectively what it means is that by independent measures, the quantity, the breadth, and the impact of research at Hofstra, which benefits both our students and society, has reached an important level. In particular, the U.S. Department of Education recognizes about 4,000 colleges and universities around the country. This latest Carnegie ranking includes about 190 R1 institutions, and Hofstra is one of 139 R2 institutions. So you didn't know there was going to be math in this podcast, but what that means is you add the R1s and R2s together, only about 8% of all colleges and universities achieve this designation. So we're really in select company.
And I understand we've achieved it, but we've also actually surpassed it. Is that right?
We have. So the criteria for R2 are really two measures. Research expenditures, you have to achieve at least $5 million a year in research expenditures as reported to the federal government, and then award at least 20 doctoral research degrees on an annual basis. And so consistently over at least the past 4 years, Hofstra has achieved those numbers. And in fact, in 2024, we greatly exceeded those numbers, 95 doctoral degrees awarded and expended $10.4 million in research, so twice the threshold.
Wow, that's amazing. And how much of that $10.4 million was in sponsored grant expenditures, you know, those prestigious research grants from NSF and NIH, for example?
Right, exactly. About $3.5 million in the most recent year was from sponsored grant expenditures from the kinds of sources that you were referencing in all total, and that represents more than doubling of our sponsored research expenditures over just the past 3 years.
That's incredible. So doubling research expenditures in just 3 years. What investments has Hofstra made over this time frame to support this kind of rapid growth? And can we expect another doubling in the next 3 to 5 years?
I'm very optimistic we can expect another doubling in the next 3 to 5 years because of these investments, at least in part. And you know them well, Susan, because you're responsible for setting the stage for all of this. But we are hiring 10 net new faculty, full-time faculty, at the time when enrollments are flat at best at the institution. We're offering much more competitive startup packages for our new faculty. The average startup package has doubled in the last 3 years. We're providing course releases for faculty when they receive these externally sponsored grants from NSF, NIH, and the like. We have also, with great acclaim from the faculty, we've engaged an internal consultant to support faculty proposal development, writing, red team review, etc. And then, as campus is well aware of, we have an active search ongoing now to hire the Senior Vice Provost for Research. That individual will serve as the university's both Chief Research Officer and Chief Research Advocate. And then I guess lastly, we have recently launched Researcher of the Year Awards, 2 per year, to recognize the scholarly research and creative activities excellence of our faculty.
So you've really built out a large infrastructure to support our faculty. And I have to say, I have personally heard from faculty how much they appreciate all of these initiatives, and particularly the consultants to help them write grants that you just mentioned. That is critical and the kind of assistance that is typical at the great research universities. So I applaud these incredible efforts. We can see that they're bearing lots of fruit and very quickly. So once we receive this research designation, do we hold it forever?
Forever. No, nothing's for certain. The designation must be maintained based on the metrics that I mentioned, the doctoral research degrees conferred and research expenditures. However, the Carnegie Classification of Institutions of Higher Education, that body I mentioned, reviews the data and updates their designations roughly every 3 years. So as long as we hit the 20 doctoral research degrees and $5 million in research expenditures benchmark will remain in R2. And since we've consistently exceeded those requirements, we are well positioned to grow into an even more impactful and vibrant R2 university.
It sure sounds like it. Now, I know that we've been aspiring to this distinction for several years, and we are absolutely thrilled to have achieved it. But how does this practically impact our students, if at all?
Absolutely. It impacts our students by ensuring that students across all the disciplines on campus have greater and additional research and experiential learning opportunities. So the way I like to describe it is the R2 designation brings a recognition and a visibility that's going to enhance our ability to recruit, attract, and retain outstanding faculty. And it is those outstanding faculty, as we have here at Hofstra, that are the centerpiece for recruiting, attracting, retaining, and graduating our students. So even though it's a research designation, it will have a very positive impact on undergraduate learning experiences across all the disciplines.
And gives them some opportunity to maybe participate in some of that research?
Absolutely. Beginning freshman year, there's no reason not to just jump in at the beginning, given the opportunities. Depends on the department, of course.
It's one of the great things really about having a focus on undergraduate students as we do, because at a big place, that would really be something the graduate students would do, right? Help the faculty with their research, with their funded research.
That's right. But in this case, it's going to be the undergraduates. And I think increasingly what we will see at Hofstra from a recruiting perspective, students are going to want to come to Hofstra as undergraduates because they know that they'll get this first-class engagement in research from the very beginning of their time here.
So I guess I understand how it helps the students. Are there other ways in which it helps the faculty that you also want to mention in addition to be able to recruit these terrific students and work with them?
So from the faculty perspective, it's going to open opportunities for additional funding sources. Hofstra will be, and Hofstra faculty will be eligible for different kinds of funding streams than we were prior to R2. It will certainly help in Hofstra's reputation and academic standing. As I said, key is going to be our ability to recruit and retain faculty, and they will have additional resources, they being the faculty, to support the kind of innovative and cutting-edge research that they want to conduct here at Hofstra.
So it sounds like a win-win-win-win.
Agreed.
I can't help but note how well this fits into our new strategic plan, which we've talked about before on this podcast, which we're calling Hofstra 100. It looks forward to our 100th anniversary, our centennial in 2035. When I first came to Hofstra, we put the R2 designation as a goal to achieve, and here we are already. So can you talk a little bit about how it more specifically helps us to implement the goals of the strategic plan, aside from just having the R2 designation?
Right. Well, I think it touches on every aspect of the strategic plan, as you said, because the Hofstra 100 strategic plan is very focused on both student and faculty success. And so an increased research profile will support initiatives in experiential learning, community-engaged learning and scholarship, and also interdisciplinary scholarship and research. So the R2 status very much aligns with those goals. And while the R2 status was a goal that we hope to achieve, this really also is a starting point for launching towards greater breadth and impact of the research emanating from Hofstra.
So it's not so much a goal we've achieved, but really a sort of new foundation, a new starting point.
That's how I think about it.
For greater things.
Certainly, we want to celebrate all the work it took to get us to this starting point. But in some respects, we're back on the starting line, and sky's the limit from here.
Okay. Now, we've mentioned, federal research funds, and I can't help thinking about the fact that this new status for Hofstra has come amid a new federal freeze of research funding for universities. And we're sitting here in the first week in March talking about this. So how is that going to affect Hofstra and other higher education institutions? I mean, what are you thinking about that as our provost and really leader of research here on campus?
Well, on the one hand, it's weighing on my mind heavily, as it is for many across the country. But I think there's still reason for optimism. So there's good reason to think that these federal research funding freezes are going to be temporary. And the reason I think that is that bipartisan investment in basic research has really been the hallmark of the United States government strategy really since World War II. And the reasons for that are myriad. Certainly among them, our research preeminence is critical to our country's economic and national security, and it's unquestionably driven the quality of life in this country and around the world. So prosperity is deeply linked to these research investments. And I would also add that these kind of research investments that the federal government makes are not the kind of research investments that can be picked up elsewhere by the private sector, for example, because the research discoveries are too premature to be thought about in the monetary way that a private company would think about that. I would also add that every state, every congressional district receives federal research investments that drive the prosperity and drives the local economies very clearly, as well as acknowledging the many national labs that rely on federal grants for vital research. I would also add that at this time, advocacy is very important in a democracy. We're starting to see groups organize in efforts to effectively communicate to elected officials, and I think now is the time for those voices to be heard. So overall, Hofstra is less affected than some other institutions at this time, but we are certainly concerned and are paying attention.
Yeah. And that money pays for the training of the next generation of scientists, right? A lot of that.
Absolutely. It really is about workforce development.
Yeah. Worrisome. But I'm glad to hear your optimism. So is there anything else you want our listeners to know about Hofstra becoming an R2?
Well, again, as we talked about, it's a very exciting time for the institution. We're in a select group of less than 10% of colleges and universities around the country, and this is putting us at the starting line, as we had said. I would also add, though, that the research, often when people think about research, and we've spent a lot of time talking about federal funding, people often think about the STEM fields.
Yes.
But research is much broader than that, and funding is much broader than that. And so we have active research programs here at Hofstra in the social sciences, the arts, the humanities, business, communications. And so there are really opportunities on this campus for every undergraduate student and graduate student to directly benefit from research and creative activities here at Hofstra.
Fantastic. Well, Charlie, I know that the Hofstra faculty are excited about all that you're doing to move research forward and support them. And it's greatly appreciated across the campus, and it's really wonderful to see one concrete example of the success that you are bringing forward from your efforts. So thank you for joining me today. I enjoyed this conversation.
I did as well. Thank you, Susan. I'm glad we had this great announcement to discuss and to celebrate, and thanks for your continued leadership to get us there.
All right, and thank you to the audience for listening, and we will see you again on the next Campus Conversation.
If you have questions, comments, or topic ideas for Hofstra's Campus Conversations, please email podcast@hofstra.edu. Hofstra University has produced and provides this podcast for general information only. It is created in collaboration with WRHU Studios.